The stars looked different from the galactic citadel. Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck, watching countless ships move between the massive station's docking ports like insects around a hive. Each vessel represented a different species, a different world, a different way of thinking. She pressed her hand against the transparent aluminum wall and smiled. Somewhere out there, 50,000 light-years away, Earth continued its slow rotation around an ordinary yellow star. Sarah had been at the Citadel for 6 months now. 6 months of learning, observing, and trying to understand a galaxy that had been united long before humans discovered fire. The Galactic Council was older than human civilization itself. 237 species, each with their own history, culture, and perspective. And now humanity had joined them. She was not what anyone expected. The other species had assumed Earth would send a military commander or a cunning politician, someone who understood power and knew how to wield it. Instead, they got Sarah Chen, a 53-year-old woman who had spent 30 years teaching history to teenagers in Seattle. She had kind eyes, graying hair, and a habit of carrying chocolate in her pockets to share with anyone who looked stressed. The other ambassadors did not know what to make of her at first. The Vrin delegation, tall crystalline beings who communicated through light patterns, thought she was a servant when she brought them tea during their first meeting. The reptilian Kolthar assumed her questions about their homeworld's twin moons were intelligence gathering. The insectoid Thessians found her constant smiling disturbing and primitive, but Sarah was patient. She had taught angry teenagers, handled difficult parents, and mediated countless schoolyard conflicts. The galaxy was just a bigger classroom. She learned their languages, or at least tried to. Her accent in Vrinspeak made them flicker with what she learned was amusement. She asked the Kolthar ambassador about his children and remembered their names for the next meeting. She discovered that Thessians did not smile because they showed joy through antenna movements, so she learned to move her hands in similar patterns when greeting them. Slowly, things changed. The Vrin stopped dimming their lights when she entered the room. The Kolthar started sharing stories about his home. The Thessian trade minister invited her to observe their ritual moon dance ceremony, an honor rarely given to outsiders. Not everyone was pleased with her approach. The Zrathian Empire watched humanity's new ambassador with cold calculation. They were a warrior species, proud and ancient, with scales like armor and eyes that burned like small suns. Their empire controlled 40 systems and maintained the largest military fleet in the council. They believed in strength, hierarchy, and the clear display of power. To them, Sarah Chen was an insult. Her kindness looked like weakness. Her patience seemed like cowardice. Her willingness to learn from others appeared to be a lack of confidence in human superiority. Ambassador Kravik, the Zrathian representative, barely acknowledged her existence in council meetings. Sarah did not let it bother her. She had dealt with bullies before. The key was not to fight them on their terms, but to change the game entirely. The breakthrough came during the Nix-Vora trade dispute. Two species, neighbors in the galactic arm, had been arguing over mineral rights in a border system for 3 years. The council meetings had become shouting matches, with both sides threatening military action. Traditional mediation had failed because both species approached the problem as a zero-sum game. Someone had to win and someone had to lose. Sarah asked a simple question during one heated session. What do both of your people actually need? The Nix representative, a floating gas being contained in a pressure suit, fell silent. The Vora delegate, a thick-furred mammalian creature, tilted her head in confusion. Not what you want to win, Sarah continued. What do your people need to survive and thrive? It turned out the Nix needed helium-3 for their energy production. The Vora needed rare earth metals for their technology. The disputed system had both, but the current proposals had each species claiming exclusive rights to the entire asteroid field. What if you shared the system? Sarah suggested. Nix take the gas giants where helium-3 is abundant. Vora take the asteroid belt where the metals are concentrated. You both get what you need, and you can establish a joint security force for the system. The solution was so simple that both sides felt embarrassed for not seeing it themselves. Within 2 weeks, they signed the Nix-Vora Cooperation Agreement. It was the first new treaty in the sector in decades. After that, other ambassadors started coming to Sarah with problems. She mediated a cultural misunderstanding between the Forians and Centauri. She helped the Drex find common ground with the Yulan on refugee policies. She was not always successful, but she always tried and she always listened. The Galactic Council started calling her the Bridge Builder. Sarah liked that name. It felt right. But not everyone appreciated bridges. The Zrathian Empire grew increasingly hostile as Sarah's influence expanded. Their military culture valued dominance and clear hierarchies. The idea that problems could be solved through empathy and cooperation threatened their entire worldview. If the galaxy could solve disputes without force, what use was their mighty fleet? A faction within the Zrathian government, led by General Throck, began calling for action. They spread messages through their networks claiming that humanity was manipulating the Council, that Sarah Chen was a spy weakening galactic resolve, that Earth was planning something sinister behind its friendly mask. Sarah knew about the threats. The Council security briefed her regularly. They offered bodyguards, but she refused. "How can I build trust if I walk around surrounded by armed guards?" she asked. The security chief, a worried Torvan female with purple skin and 6 arms, reluctantly agreed but insisted on scanning equipment at all events. The cultural exchange ceremony was Sarah's idea. Each species would share food, art, and music from their homeworld. It would be held in the Great Hall of the Citadel, open to all delegates and their staff. Sarah had been planning it for months, coordinating with over 100 different species to make sure everyone felt included. The night of the ceremony, the Great Hall glowed with lights from 1,000 worlds. Tables overflowed with foods in every color imaginable. Music from dozens of civilizations blended into something strange and beautiful. Sarah wore a simple blue dress and moved through the crowd, greeting everyone, trying foods that sometimes tasted wonderful and sometimes made her eyes water. She was laughing with the Vryn delegation, watching their light patterns dance to human jazz music when she saw him, a Zrathian male, young, with scales that shimmered with barely contained rage. He moved through the crowd with purpose, his hand hidden beneath his ceremonial robes. Sarah's instinct was to run, but her training as a teacher kicked in. Running would cause panic. Instead, she stepped toward him, smiling, hand extended in the human gesture of greeting. "Welcome," she said in careful Zrathian. "I'm glad you could join us." He pulled out the plasma blade. The weapon hummed with lethal energy, designed to cut through armor and bone. Around them, people screamed and dove for cover. Sarah did not run. She looked into his burning eyes and saw fear there, not hatred. Fear of change, fear of irrelevance, fear of a galaxy that no longer needed warriors. "It's okay," she said softly. "I understand." The blade struck her chest. Sarah's last thought before darkness claimed her was not of pain or regret. She thought of her daughter back on Earth and hoped the chocolate in her pocket would not melt before someone found it. She had meant to give it to the Thracian ambassador's child. Ambassador Sarah Chen died on the polished floor of the Great Hall, surrounded by the art and music of 200 worlds. Her blood, red and very human, pooled beneath her as the Zrathian assassin was tackled by security forces. The galaxy held its breath. Humanity had just lost its first ambassador to violence. Now everyone waited to see how the humans would respond. Every species in the council knew what came next. It was written in 50,000 years of history. When you kill an ambassador, you start a war. The news reached Earth 18 hours after Sarah Chen's death. The speed of quantum communication meant that billions of humans learned about the assassination almost simultaneously. Schools where Sarah had taught held silent vigils. Her daughter Emma collapsed when the officials came to her door. The president of Earth's united government sat in the Oval Office with her head in her hands, knowing the decision she made next would define humanity's place in the galaxy forever. On the Galactic Citadel, Ambassador Kravik of the Zrathian Empire stood before the council with his head held high. The assassin had been captured alive. He was a member of the Iron Scale faction, a group within the Zrathian military that believed the Empire was growing soft, that the council had become weak, and that humanity represented everything wrong with the galaxy's direction. "The Zrathian Empire condemns this unauthorized action," Kravik stated, his translated words echoing through the chamber. His tone suggested he condemned nothing at all. "The individual responsible will face our justice system. We expect this unfortunate incident will not affect diplomatic relations." The other ambassadors sat in shocked silence. Unfortunate incident, as if Sarah Chen had not bled out on their hall floor, as if her kindness and patience had not been rewarded with murder. The Vryn delegate dimmed to almost black, a sign of profound grief in their species. The Kolthar ambassador had left the chamber entirely, too angry to trust himself to speak. The Thracian representative's antennae drooped with sorrow. They had all grown to respect the human ambassador. Some had even considered her a friend. "What is Earth's response?" the council chairman asked. He was an ancient being from a species called the Archons, creatures so old that they barely interacted with the younger races anymore. His voice was like distant thunder. "Do the humans accept the Zarathian statement?" Everyone waited. The human delegation's seats were empty. Earth had not sent anyone to speak for them yet. Silence. Across the galaxy, military analysts worked through the night, calculating Earth's likely response. Humanity was a young species, but they were not powerless. Their ships were smaller than Zarathian dreadnoughts, but faster and more maneuverable. Their weapons technology was innovative, sometimes dangerously so. They had a population of 12 billion spread across Earth, Mars, and 15 colony worlds. They had resources, manufacturing capability, and now they had motivation. The Zarathian Empire activated its defensive fleets. General Throck, the leader of the Iron Scale faction and secret planner of the assassination, addressed his warriors with fire in his voice. "The humans will come seeking revenge. They will show their true nature now. When they attack, we will be ready. We will crush them and prove to this soft council that only strength matters in this galaxy." His fleet of 300 warships took positions along the border between Zarathian and human space. They waited for the Earth fleet to arrive. They waited for the first shots of a new war. But the human ships did not move. Every single Earth vessel, from massive carriers to small scouts, remained docked at their stations. Human colonies went dark on communication channels. No threats were issued. No demands were made. No declarations of war came through the quantum network. Earth was silent. 72 hours passed. The galaxy grew increasingly nervous. The Cathari, a species known for their brutal efficiency in warfare, sent their military historians to brief the council. "In our culture," the Cathari representative explained, "if an ambassador is killed, we destroy 3 enemy colonies within 24 hours. It is the only proportional response. The silence from Earth is unusual, deeply unusual." The council reviewed historical records. In 50,000 years of galactic civilization, there had been 147 ambassadorial assassinations. Every single one had led to immediate military retaliation. The average response time was 9 hours. The longest any species had waited before declaring war was 36 hours, and that was only because they needed time to mobilize their fleets. Earth had been silent for 3 times that long. "Perhaps they are afraid," Ambassador Kravik suggested in a private communication to General Throck. "Perhaps the humans realize they cannot win against our empire." But the Thracian trade minister disagreed. She had worked closely with Sarah Chen for months. "Humans do not feel fear the way we do," she told her security council. "I studied their history. They have a saying, 'Don't mistake patience for weakness.' I think we should be very worried about what comes next." The Vryn delegation spent their time in meditation, their light patterns dim and slow. They had considered Sarah a friend. In Vryn culture, there was a concept called light debt, a spiritual obligation created when someone showed you kindness. Sarah had shown them tremendous kindness. They felt her death as if one of their own species had fallen. The Forian ambassador, a being that looked like living metal, accessed Sarah's public records. He watched recordings of her teaching, saw her patience with difficult students, observed how she turned conflicts into learning opportunities. He read her academic papers on conflict resolution and cross-cultural communication. He studied her methods. She was a teacher, he told his aides. Teachers do not think like soldiers. They think in longer terms. They think about changing minds, not breaking them. The Nyx representative, still grateful for Sarah's mediation in their dispute with the Vora, tried to contact the Earth government directly. He wanted to express condolences, to offer support, to do something. His messages went unanswered. Earth's diplomatic channels were closed. The entire planet seemed to have turned inward, grieving in private. On the Citadel, Sarah's body had been prepared for transport back to Earth. The medical staff who handled her remains did so with unusual gentleness. Even in death, she commanded respect. Her personal effects were catalogued. A data pad with notes for future mediations, a book of poetry from a dozen worlds. and 3 pieces of chocolate still in her pocket. The security forces interrogated the assassin, a young Zarathian named Vokesh. He was 23 years old in Earth years, barely an adult by Zarathian standards. He had joined the Ironscale faction a year ago, recruited by propaganda that painted humans as dangerous manipulators. He had been told that Sarah Chen was a spy, that she was weakening the Zarathian Empire's position, that killing her would make him a hero. Now he sat in a cell, watching recordings of Sarah's work play on the walls. It was a psychological technique the Citadel security used. Make the killers see their victims as real people, break them down. Vokesh watched Sarah teach the Vryn to make tea. He watched her laugh with the Kolthar children during a school visit. He watched her spend 3 hours helping a Centauri delegate practice a speech in their native language because the translator made them uncomfortable. Turn it off, Vokesh demanded. But the recordings continued. Sarah mediating disputes, Sarah learning languages, Sarah sharing meals, Sarah building bridges. What have I done? Vokesh whispered to himself, but no one answered. On Earth, Emma Chen sat in her mother's house, surrounded by things that smelled like Sarah. Books everywhere, photos on every wall, a coffee mug that said best teacher in 15 different languages. Emma was 31 years old, a doctor, and she had never felt more lost. The government officials came again. They wanted to know if Emma would speak for humanity at the council. They wanted to know if she wanted revenge. They wanted to know what her mother would have wanted. Emma looked at them with red eyes. My mother spent her whole life teaching that violence creates more violence. She knew she might die doing this work. She went anyway. Don't make her death meaningless by starting a war in her name. The officials left. Emma sat alone with her grief and her mother's books. 72 hours after the assassination, the silence broke. Earth sent a message to the Galactic Council. It was not a military transmission. It came through diplomatic channels. The council chairman opened it with trepidation, expecting demands for justice or declarations of war. Instead, they got something nobody had predicted. The human delegation will arrive at the Citadel in 48 hours, the message read. We request time to address the full council. We have a proposal regarding the death of Ambassador Sarah Chen. A proposal, not a demand, not a threat. A proposal. The galaxy held its breath again, waiting to see what humanity had planned. The Zarathian fleets remained on high alert. General Throck studied tactical maps, trying to predict where the humans would strike first. The Cathari military analysts reviewed their projections, confused by the data that did not fit any historical pattern. And across human space, something was happening. Ships were being loaded, but not with weapons. Factories were working overtime, but not building ammunition. Scientists worked through the night, but not on military applications. Humanity was preparing something, but nobody could figure out what. The waiting was almost worse than war. The human ships arrived at the Galactic Citadel exactly on schedule. There were 12 vessels, each marked with Earth's blue and green insignia. The Council's defense systems scanned them automatically, checking for weapons, preparing for potential threats. What they found confused everyone. The ships were transports, cargo vessels. Not a single warship in the group. Their holds were full, but not with soldiers or missiles. The scan showed medical equipment, computers, construction materials, and hundreds of passengers who registered as civilians. Ambassador Kravik watched the ships dock from his private quarters. His scales flickered with uncertainty, an emotion he rarely felt. What are they doing? He asked his aide. His aide had no answer. Neither did anyone else. The human delegation disembarked in the main receiving area of the Citadel. The council had expected military officers in crisp uniforms, generals with hard eyes and harder hearts, politicians ready to make demands. What they got instead made them question everything they thought they knew about humanity. The first person off the ship was Emma Chen. She wore a simple black dress and carried a box under her arm. Her eyes were red from crying, but she held her head high. Behind her came a mix of people that made no tactical sense whatsoever. Teachers, doctors, engineers, artists, musicians, historians. There were elderly humans with silver hair and young ones barely out of school. Some carried instruments. Others had data pads and presentation materials. One woman had an actual canvas and paints. Not a single soldier among them. The council chairman met them in the grand hall, the same hall where Sarah had died 5 days ago. The bloodstains had been cleaned, but everyone remembered. The human delegation stood in that space, in the exact spot where their ambassador had fallen, and they did not flinch. "We grieve with you," the chairman said in the formal speech of condolence that protocol required. "The council condemns the violence that took Ambassador Chen's life. We await your response with open minds and heavy hearts." Emma Chen stepped forward. She placed the box she carried on the floor and opened it carefully. Inside were Sarah's personal effects, the datapad, the poetry book, the chocolate. "These belong to my mother," Emma said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. "She was killed here in this room while trying to bring people together. The galaxy expects us to respond with violence. That's what history says we should do. That's what every species has done before us." She paused and looked around at the assembled ambassadors, hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds, all watching her with various expressions of sympathy, curiosity, and in the Zrathian section barely concealed hostility. "We're not going to do that," Emma continued. "My mother spent her last months building bridges between worlds. She knew it was dangerous work. She knew there were people who hated her for it. She died with your names on her lips, speaking words of forgiveness to her killer. We're not going to destroy what she built. We're going to finish it." The silence that followed was profound. Ambassador Kravik leaned forward in his seat, scales clicking with agitation. This made no sense. Where was the fury? Where was the pride? Where was the demand for blood payment? Another human stepped forward, an older man with white hair and kind eyes. His name was Dr. Robert Martinez, and he had been Sarah's colleague at the university on Earth. "We have a proposal," Dr. Martinez said. "We call it the Sarah Chen Memorial Initiative. With the council's permission, we would like to present it now." The chairman, still processing what Emma had said, nodded slowly. "Please proceed." The Grand Hall's display systems activated. Images appeared in the air above the assembly, holographic representations of data and plans. The humans had prepared a comprehensive presentation, and what it showed made several ambassadors gasp in shock. The first image showed Zrathian colony worlds, specifically the outer territories of the Empire. Poor worlds, struggling worlds, places where resources were scarce and opportunities even scarcer. Places where young Zrathians grew up angry and desperate. Perfect recruiting grounds for groups like the Iron Scale faction. "We studied the social conditions that create extremism," Dr. Martinez explained. Ambassador Chen had notes about this. She was concerned that economic inequality in the Zrathian outer colonies was creating desperation. Desperate people are easy to radicalize. They look for someone to blame, someone to hate. The images changed, showing schools, hospitals, water treatment facilities, advanced designs, human technology adapted for Zrathian biology and culture. "We're offering to build infrastructure on 12 Zrathian colony worlds," Dr. Martinez continued. "Schools where Zrathian children can learn skills that will help them thrive. Hospitals with medical technology to treat diseases that currently have no cure in the outer territories. Water purification systems, power generation facilities, agricultural support to make the colonies self-sufficient." Ambassador Kravik stood abruptly, his voice a roar. "You think you can buy our loyalty? You think building a few schools will make us forget that you—" "We're not building them for you," Emma interrupted, her voice cutting through his anger like a blade. "We're building them for the children who grow up in places where the only escape is joining a military faction that promises them glory. We're building them for the mothers who watch their kids go hungry. We're building them for every Zrathian who deserves a chance at a better life." The presentation continued. A human woman stepped forward, introducing herself as Professor Linda Okafor, an expert in educational systems. She explained the scholarship program. 50,000 Zrathian students chosen from the outer colonies would be offered full scholarships to study at universities across human space. They would learn engineering, medicine, art, philosophy, whatever they wanted. They would live with human families, learn human culture, and take that knowledge back to their homeworlds. "We're not asking them to become human," Professor Okafor said. "We're asking them to become bridges like Ambassador Chen was. We want them to see that different species can learn from each other, help each other, grow together." The Cathari representative stood, her warrior's face showing complete confusion. "I do not understand. You are offering aid to the species that killed your ambassador? This goes against every principle of honor and justice. Where is your pride?" A young human man answered, his voice passionate. His name was James, and he had been one of Sarah's students years ago. Our pride is in finishing what she started. Our justice is in making sure no other parent watches their child grow up desperate enough to become a killer. Our honor is in proving that my teacher was right, that building bridges is stronger than building walls. More humans presented more parts of the initiative. Medical teams ready to deploy to Zrathian colonies suffering from a plague their own government could not contain. Agricultural experts willing to teach sustainable farming techniques. Artists and musicians prepared to share human culture while learning Zrathian traditions. Engineers with designs for improving the colony infrastructure at no cost to the Zrathian government. The presentation lasted 2 hours. By the end, even Ambassador Kravik was silent, his burning eyes dimmed with something that might have been shame. The final part of the presentation was the most devastating. Dr. Martinez activated a recording. Sarah's voice filled the hall, speaking from beyond death. It was her last transmission to Earth, recorded the morning of her death. "To my family, my friends, and the people of Earth," Sarah said in the recording. Her smile was warm, her eyes full of life. "If you're hearing this, something has gone wrong. I knew this work was dangerous. I knew there were people who hated what I represented. But I also knew it was worth doing. Please, if I die, don't let it be for nothing. Don't start a war in my name. Don't let hatred win. Take everything I tried to build and make it bigger. Show the galaxy what humanity is really capable of. Not destruction, but creation. Not war, but healing. Promise me." Emma Chen was crying openly now. So were several other humans in the delegation. But more surprisingly, some of the alien ambassadors showed signs of emotion too. The Vryn flickered erratically. The Kolthar delegate had covered his face with his claws. Even some of the Zrathians in the audience seemed moved, their scales dim and quiet. The recording ended. Emma picked up her mother's chocolate from the box and held it up. She carried this to give to children she met. She died with it in her pocket, probably planning to give it to someone after the ceremony. That's who my mother was. That's who humanity chooses to be. She walked across the hall to where the Zrathian delegation sat. Ambassador Kravik watched her approach with wary eyes. Emma stopped in front of him and held out the chocolate. "This was hers," Emma said softly. "She would have wanted you to have it. Not as an insult, not as a bribe, just as a reminder that we're all people, all of us trying to do our best in a complicated galaxy." Kravik stared at the chocolate for a long moment. His clawed hand trembled as he reached out and took it. He said nothing, but something in his burning eyes had changed. The council chairman spoke into the profound silence that followed. "This is unprecedented. In 50,000 years of recorded galactic history, no species has ever responded to an act of war with an act of compassion. I must ask humans of Earth, do you not want justice for your fallen ambassador?" Dr. Martinez answered. The first human medical ship arrived at the Zrathian colony world of Krathik 7, 3 weeks after the council vote. The colony was poor, desperate, and suspicious. 10,000 Zrathians lived there in conditions that would have shocked the Empire's core worlds. The plague had been killing their children for 5 years. Their own government had sent supplies twice, but it was never enough. The Iron Scale faction recruited heavily from worlds like this, promising glory and purpose to young people who had nothing else. The colonists watched the human ship land with weapons ready and hearts full of doubt. They expected tricks. They expected spies. They expected anything except what actually emerged from the landing ramp. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo was the first off the ship. She was a medical doctor, 50 years old, with dark skin and gentle hands. Behind her came a team of 20 humans, all medical staff, all volunteers. They had given up comfortable positions on Earth to come here, to help people whose species had killed one of their own. "We're here to help," Dr. Okonkwo said in careful Zrathian, her accent making the words sound strange but sincere. "We brought medicine for the plague. We brought doctors who know how to treat it. We're not here to judge. We're not here to take anything. We're just here to help." The colony administrator, a grizzled warrior named Vrek who had lost 3 grandchildren to the plague, studied her with burning eyes. Why would you help us after what we did?" Dr. Okonkwo smiled sadly. "Because sick children are sick children, no matter what species they are. Ambassador Chen would have come herself if she could. We're here in her place." The medical team set up their equipment in the colony's largest building. They worked 18-hour days, treating children first, then adults, showing the local medical staff how the treatments worked, so they could continue after the humans left. Dr. Okonkwo held dying Zrathian, children in her arms, and wept with their parents when the medicine came too late. She celebrated when the plague finally broke 3 months later, dancing with the colonists in their traditional style even though her human body was not made for it. Vrek watched all of this with growing confusion. These humans had every reason to hate his species, but they showed only compassion. When the plague ended and the medical team prepared to leave for another colony, Vrek gave Dr. Okonkwo his military medal, the highest honor he possessed. "I was iron scale," he confessed to her. "I believed their words about human weakness. I was wrong. Please forgive me." Dr. Okonkwo took the medal with tears in her eyes. "Ambassador Chen would have forgiven you already. I think we can do the same." Similar scenes played out across 12 colony worlds. Human teachers arrived and worked alongside Zrathian educators, sharing knowledge and learning in return. Human engineers built water treatment plants and power stations, training local workers to maintain them. Human artists collaborated with Zrathian musicians to create hybrid forms of beauty that neither species could have made alone. The scholarship program began. Young Zrathians from the outer colonies, many of whom had been considering joining militant factions because they saw no other future, suddenly had hope. They could study on Earth, learn from the species they had been taught to hate, and return home with skills that would help their families and colonies. One of the first scholarship recipients was a young female named Thesik. She had lost her brother to gang violence and had been one meeting away from joining the Iron Scale faction herself. Instead, she found herself on Earth, living with a human family in New York, studying engineering at Columbia University. Her host family was the Johnsons. They had a daughter her age named Michelle. Thesik expected coldness, expected them to hate her because of what her species had done. Instead, Mrs. Johnson hugged her the first night and told her she was family now. Mr. Johnson spent hours teaching her about human sports. Michelle taught her how to navigate Earth's confusing social customs and laughed when Thesik's scales changed color with embarrassment. "Why aren't you angry?" Thesik asked Michelle one night 6 months into her stay. "My people killed your ambassador." "How can you be so kind?" Michelle thought about it for a moment. "My dad told me something Ambassador Chen used to say. Hating you won't bring her back, but helping you might prevent the next tragedy. Besides, you're not the person who killed her. You're just Thesik, my weird alien sister who still doesn't understand why humans find cat videos funny." Thesik sent regular messages home to her colony. She told them about the humans she met, the kindness she experienced, the opportunities Earth offered. Her messages spread through the outer colonies like wildfire, passed from family to family. Young Zrathians began questioning the propaganda they had been fed about humanity, but not everyone was pleased with the changes. General Throck and the Iron Scale faction watched their recruiting numbers plummet. How could they convince young Zrathians that humans were dangerous when humans were healing their sick and educating their children? How could they maintain that only military strength mattered when compassion was proving far more powerful? Throck called an emergency meeting of his inner circle. "The humans are destroying us with kindness," he snarled. "They're making us look like monsters. We must act." But his officers were divided now. Some still believed in the old ways. Others had family in the colonies receiving human aid. One young captain spoke up, her voice uncertain. "General, my sister lives on Krathik 7. The humans saved her daughter's life. How can we call them enemies when they do things our own government would not?" Throck's rage was terrible, but he could see he was losing control. The foundation of his power, the belief that only strength mattered, was crumbling under the weight of human compassion. On the Citadel, the Galactic Council watched these changes with growing amazement. The Vryn delegation spent hours studying the human approach, trying to understand the philosophy behind it. The Cathari military analysts revised their entire understanding of strategic doctrine. The concept that kindness could be a weapon, that healing could be more effective than hurting, challenged 50,000 years of conventional wisdom. Meanwhile, the Citadel security forces were conducting an investigation into the assassination. They had interrogated Vokesh extensively, following the trail of communications and funding that had led to Sarah's death. What they found shocked everyone. The evidence showed that the assassination had not been a purely Zorathian operation. Money had come from outside the Empire, funneled through complex channels designed to hide its origin. The investigation traced it back to the hegemony of Troll, a species that controlled banking and trade across several sectors. The troll were not warriors. They were business people, and war was good for business. Weapons sales, reconstruction contracts, emergency loans to struggling governments. Conflict generated enormous profits for those who knew how to exploit it. The past 50,000 years of carefully maintained peace through mutual destruction had created a galactic economy where the troll thrived. The human approach threatened all of that. If conflicts could be solved through cooperation and healing, who needed weapons manufacturers? If species could help each other instead of fighting, who needed emergency war loans? The troll had quietly funded extremist groups across the galaxy for centuries, maintaining just enough tension to keep the military-industrial complex running without triggering actual galaxy-wide war. They had funded the Iron Scale faction. They had paid for the propaganda. They had provided the plasma blade that killed Sarah Chen. Their plan was simple: provoke humanity into a war with the Zrathian Empire, destabilize the Council and profit from the chaos. Instead, humanity had responded with the Sarah Chen Memorial Initiative, and the whole plan was falling apart. When the investigation's findings were presented to the Council, the reaction was explosive. Species that had nearly gone to war over the assassination realized they had been manipulated. The Cathari ambassador, who had been prepared to offer military support to Earth for their expected retaliation, stood before the Council with fury in her eyes. "We almost destroyed each other," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "We almost gave the troll exactly what they wanted. And the only species who saw through it was the youngest, newest member of this council. The humans knew what we did not, that the real enemy was not the Zrathian Empire or any military force. The real enemy was the system that profits from our hatred of each other." Ambassador Kravik stood as well. The past weeks had changed him. He had watched his people in the colonies embrace the human aid. He had read the reports from the scholarship students. He had seen Zrathians and humans working together, learning from each other, building something new, and he had learned about the troll funding that had corrupted his own government. The Zrathian Empire was used, Kravik admitted, and the words seemed to pain him. The Iron Scale faction was fed money and propaganda by the troll. They manipulated our cultural values, turned our pride into a weapon against ourselves. We owe humanity a debt that can never be fully repaid. Ambassador Chen died because of our failure to see we were being controlled. The Council voted to investigate the troll hegemony fully. What they found was decades of similar manipulations, funding extremist groups in dozens of species, carefully maintaining tensions that want justice for everyone. Justice. 1 year after Sarah Chen's death, the Galactic Citadel held a memorial ceremony. Representatives from every council species attended, but the gathering was different from the typical formal assemblies. Zrathian children from the outer colonies played with human kids on the station's observation deck. Vryn scholars discussed philosophy with Earth professors. Cathari warriors trained alongside human peacekeepers, learning non-violent conflict resolution techniques that they would have mocked a year ago. The Sarah Chen Memorial Schools now operated on 47 worlds across 16 species territories. They were not just buildings but movements, places where different cultures came together to learn from each other. The curriculum was revolutionary, half traditional education, half cross-species cultural exchange. Students learned mathematics and literature, but also how to see the universe through different eyes. Emma Chen stood in the memorial garden that had been planted in her mother's honor. Trees from Earth grew alongside crystal formations from Vryn, flowering plants from Kolthar, and hardy shrubs from Zrathian colony worlds. It was a living representation of what her mother had died trying to create, different species growing together, roots intertwined, stronger for their diversity. She would have loved this, Emma said softly. Beside her stood Thesik, who had returned to the Citadel for the ceremony. The young Zrathian had completed her first year at Columbia and was thriving. Her scales had a healthy shine, and her eyes no longer held the desperate anger of a year ago. "I never met her," Thesik replied, "but I feel like I know her. Every human I meet carries a piece of her. The way they teach, the way they listen, the way they refuse to give up on people. It's like she's still alive in all of you." They were not alone in the garden. Ambassador Kravik approached slowly, his movements more humble than they had been a year ago. He carried something wrapped in traditional Zrathian silk, "I have something for you," he said to Emma, his translated voice formal but warm. "It took months to create, but it was important." He unwrapped the package, revealing a sculpture made of Zrathian crystal and human steel, fused together in a way that neither material could achieve alone. The sculpture showed two hands reaching toward each other, neither human nor Zrathian, but somehow both. Where they touched, the crystal and steel became something new, something beautiful. "On my world," Kravik explained, "we have a tradition. When a warrior dies honorably, we create art from their weapon to show that violence has transformed into beauty. Your mother was not a warrior by our standards, but she showed more courage than any soldier I have known. This is made from the metal of my old battle armor, melted down and combined with crystal from Earth. It represents what she tried to teach us, that different peoples can become stronger together." Emma took the sculpture with trembling hands. Tears ran down her face, but she smiled. "Thank you. This means more than you know." The formal memorial ceremony began in the Great Hall. The bloodstains were long gone, but the memory remained. The council chairman, the ancient Archon who rarely showed emotion, spoke first. "Ambassador Sarah Chen was murdered in this room 1 year ago," he said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. "Her death could have started a war. Instead, it started a revolution, not of weapons, but of ideas. The humans showed us something we had forgotten in 50,000 years of civilization. They showed us that the strongest response to hatred is not greater hatred, but the courage to break the cycle." The Vryn representative spoke next, her light patterns pulsing with colors that represented both grief and hope. "In our language, there is no word for what the humans did. We have words for revenge, for justice, for balance, but we did not have a word for choosing compassion over vengeance until now. We call it Sarah Light, the choice to illuminate darkness rather than adding to it." One by one, species representatives shared how the past year had changed them. The Cathari talked about integrating human conflict resolution techniques into their military training. The Thracians described how human agricultural methods had ended a famine on 2 of their worlds. The Forians explained how studying Sarah's teaching methods had revolutionized their own education system. Then it was humanity's turn to speak. But instead of a politician or military leader, a teenager walked to the podium. His name was Marcus, and he was 16 years old. He had been one of Sarah's students years ago, and now he was part of the Youth Ambassador program that had been created in her honor. "Mrs. Chen was my teacher when I was 12, Marcus said, his young voice carrying surprising strength. "I was angry back then. My parents had divorced, I was getting in fights at school, and I thought the whole world was against me. Mrs. Chen could have given up on me. She could have sent me to detention or expelled me. Instead, she talked to me every day after class. She asked me about my life. She listened to my anger and didn't judge me for it. She taught me that being strong doesn't mean never feeling pain. It means choosing what you do with that pain." Marcus paused, looking around at the assembled ambassadors from hundreds of worlds. "When Mrs. Chen was killed, Earth could have chosen revenge. We could have turned our pain into more violence. But that's not what she taught us. She taught us that real strength is in building, not destroying. In healing, not hurting. In hope, not hatred. So that's what we did. And you know what? It worked better than any weapon could have." The applause that followed was not the polite diplomatic clapping typical of council events. It was genuine, emotional, and it lasted for several minutes. Several ambassadors openly wept. After the public ceremony, there was a smaller, more private gathering. Vokesh, Sarah's assassin, was brought from his cell to the memorial garden under heavy guard. The Zrathian legal system had sentenced him to life imprisonment, but the humans had requested this meeting. Emma Chen stood face to face with the being who had killed her mother. Vokesh's scales were dull from his year in captivity, and his eyes showed nothing but shame and regret. The guards kept weapons ready, but Emma had insisted there be no barrier between them. "Why?" Emma asked simply. "Why did you do it?" Vokesh's voice was barely a whisper. "Because I was angry and scared, and someone told me your mother was the enemy. I believed them because it was easier than admitting I was lost. I have watched recordings of her work every day for a year. I see now what I destroyed. I see the good she brought to the galaxy, the bridges she built. I killed the person who would have helped people like me, angry, lost youth with no hope. I cannot ask for forgiveness. I do not deserve it." Emma was silent for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a book, her mother's journal. the one Sarah had kept during her time at the Citadel. She opened it to a specific page and read aloud. "Today I met some young Zerathians from the outer colonies," Emma read. "They're so angry, and I understand why. They've been forgotten by their own government, left to struggle while the core worlds prosper. That anger makes them vulnerable to extremists. I need to find a way to help them. Maybe educational programs, economic development. I'll talk to Earth about it tomorrow." Emma closed the journal and looked at Vokesh. "My mother wrote this 2 weeks before you killed her. She saw your pain. She was trying to help. And even after you killed her, we finished her work. Do you know where I've been for the past 6 months?" Vokesh shook his head, unable to speak. "I've been working at a medical clinic on Krathix 7, your home colony. I've been treating people who grew up like you did, desperate and forgotten. I met your mother, Vokesh. She's sick, but she's too proud to ask for help. I've been treating her. She doesn't know I'm the daughter of the woman you killed. She just knows I'm a doctor who cares." Vokesh's composure broke. He fell to his knees, scales trembling. Why would you help her? Why would you help any of us after what I did?" Emma knelt beside him, close enough that the guards tensed but did not interfere. "Because my mother taught me that people are not their worst moments. She taught me that everyone deserves a chance at redemption. And she taught me that the only way to stop violence is to refuse to continue the cycle." She placed her mother's journal in his clawed hands. "Read this. Learn from her. And when you get out of prison someday, because I'm going to petition for your sentence to be reduced, you're going to help me finish her work. You're going to spend the rest of your life building the bridges you tried to burn. Do you understand?" Vokesh clutched the journal like a sacred object. "I understand, I will. I swear on my life I will." As the guards led him away, Thesic approached Emma. "That was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen," the young Zerathian said. "You weaponize forgiveness. You turned it into something he has to carry for the rest of his life. It's more powerful than any punishment." Emma smiled sadly. "Mom always said the best revenge is making the world so much better that your enemies have no choice but to live in it." The memorial year concluded with a special council session. The chairman brought forth a proposal that would have been unthinkable before Sarah's death. "Humanity has taught us that our current system is flawed. We have maintained 50,000 years of peace through fear of mutual destruction, fear of economic ruin, fear of isolation. The humans suggest something different. They propose peace through mutual growth.